Early 1944, Nazi Germany. Allied bombing raids have reduced the fighter aircraft production of German factories by as much as 2/3. In order to reduce the effectiveness of Allied bombing, the Reich Ministry of Armaments and War Production, led by Albert Speer and the SS, agreed to accelerate construction of massive underground factories to move production there. New concrete bunkers using concentration camp prisoners are to be built because existing underground areas such as caves and mines are not suited to factory production. In 1944 and 1945, hundreds of satellite camps attached to major concentration camps are established throughout the German Reich, where inmates are forced to hollow out the sides of mountains or caves for immense systems of tunnels, and factories to build new weaponry such as the Messerschmitt 262 jet fighter or V-2 rockets. One such camp becomes Kaufering IV, where in late April 1945, as US armed forces approach the camp, the SS burns hundreds of people alive to prevent their liberation by the American troops. The camp's commandant, responsible for these atrocities, is Johann Eichelsdörfer. Johann Baptist Eichelsdörfer was born on the 20th of January 1890 in the city of Dachau, then part of the German Empire. Before he started his military career, he worked in a factory, and together with his wife, he had 3 children. The First World War began on the 28th of July, 1914. During the war, Eichelsdörfer served as Feldwebel, which was equivalent to a sergeant in the 5th Infantry Regiment Grand Duke Ernst Ludwig von Hessen of the Bavarian Army. When the First World War ended on the 11th of November 1918, Germany experienced great political turmoil. The Treaty of Versailles imposed harsh terms on Germany, which had lost the war. The Reichswehr, the German army, was restricted to 100,000 men. In addition, the country saw the overthrow of its monarchy. In its place was the new Weimar Republic, a democratic government. Following the war, Eichelsdörfer remained committed to his military career, eventually leaving the Reichswehr in 1924 with the rank of lieutenant. When Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany in January 1933, he was determined to overturn the military and territorial provisions of the Treaty of Versailles to incorporate ethnically German territories into the Reich. Hitler moved to extend German power in Central Europe, annexing Austria and destroying Czechoslovakia in 1938 and 1939. Other territorial demands followed. Great Britain and France hoped to prevent another world war by giving in to Hitler's demands through a policy of appeasement. However, Hitler's aggressive foreign policy resulted in the outbreak of the Second World War on the 1st of September 1939, when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. Eichelsdörfer was drafted into the Wehrmacht, the German army, in November 1940, and transferred to a training unit for heavy goods transportation in Bamberg as a lieutenant. After missions in France, Poland, and the Soviet Union, he was hospitalized for rheumatism in August 1943. Then, he spent a short period of time in the town of Oranienburg. In Oranienburg was the main office of the concentration camps inspectorate, the central SS administrative and managerial authority for the concentration camps of the Third Reich. In the spring of 1944, Eichelsdörfer had been assigned to the SS Guard team of the Dachau concentration camp, from which on the 15th of July 1944, he was sent to one of its subcamps for training for camp duty. At the end of August 1944, Eichelsdörfer was transferred to the Kaufering subcamp complex of Dachau concentration camp. At the Kaufering camps, prisoners often slept in poorly heated and badly provisioned earthen huts, which were partially submerged in the soil and covered with earth to disguise them from the air. The larger of Kaufering's 11 camps each contained several thousand prisoners, the vast majority of them Jews. Disease, malnutrition, and the brutal conditions in the workplace and in the camps took its toll on the inmates, resulting in a high mortality rate. People who arrived at the Kaufering subcamps had already been held in other camps or ghettos, or had been forced to march long distances. They were therefore already very weak when they arrived at Kaufering, where they were then forced to do hard labor such as clearing trees, removing tree roots, building earth walls, laying rails, and loading and unloading cement bags and other heavy goods with little food. Instead of dying in a gas chamber, Jewish prisoners in the Kaufering subcamps were driven to their deaths with work for German arms production. Prisoners had to line up for roll call as early as 5 a.m. and then walk to their workplaces, sometimes over long distances. In addition to the daytime work, there were also night shifts, during which accidents occurred easily as people fell asleep or collapsed from exhaustion and fatigue. Due to the frequent contact with cement dust, many prisoners also suffered from rashes. In addition, illnesses resulted from hypothermia. There was no bandaging material or medication available, and the less resistant among the prisoners died after only a few weeks, the others after a few months. Those who were previously unable to work were sent to Auschwitz by the camp management, and after the gas chambers there had ceased their work, were transferred to the Kaufering IV camp, which was also referred to as the Kreppierlager, or dying camp, because people there died very quickly. Eichelsdörfer first became head of Kaufering VIII for 4 weeks, and in October 1944 of Kaufering VII, joining the SS in the meantime. Then, in January 1945, he took charge of Kaufering IV, which at that time had already been converted into a sick camp. Kaufering IV was located between the villages of Kaufering and Hurlach, and was established in September 1944 for 500 prisoners. The population later grew to 3,000. Before it was converted into a sick camp, where prisoners were sent to die after they could no longer work. They were forced to work at the Lager Lechfeld airfield in road construction and on the bunker Valnus II. When a typhus epidemic broke out in early 1945, the camp physician Dr. Max Blanquer and the SS guards would not enter the barracks to avoid infection, and prisoner doctors could do little as they had no medicine or equipment. As the US armed forces approached the Kaufering complex in late April 1945, the SS began evacuating the camps, sending the prisoners on death marches in the direction of Dachau. Those inmates who could not keep up were often shot or beaten to death by the guards. On the 27th of April 1945, the SS, under the command of camp physician Max Blanquer, set the Kaufering IV concentration camp on fire, including the 360 prisoners who are unable to walk, to prevent their liberation by the US troops. The Jewish prisoners were locked in their huts and told they would be shot if they came out. The buildings were then set on fire. Some inmates burned to death in their huts. Others found the strength to break down the doors and crawl out to die in the streets. While some prisoners had remnants of clothing on their charred bodies, most were naked. Only a short time later, Kaufering IV was liberated by American troops, who found only 12 survivors. For Julius Bernstein, the 27th of April 1945 was the day that changed his life. His unit, the 12th Armored Division, was in the vicinity of Landsberg am Lech when it encountered what remained of a concentration camp there. He later recalled, "We arrived a half an hour too late. When we entered the camp, we saw what happened. The camp commander, knowing that the place was completely surrounded and there was no escape, tried to destroy the evidence. There were about 4,000 inmates, and they were all locked in their tar paper shack barracks and hosed down with some flammable liquid. They were cremated alive. I was knee-deep in bodies all afternoon. I think there were 12 who managed to get out. As you get older, you forget a lot of things, but there's one thing I can't forget. Even as I'm talking with you now, I can smell those bodies burning. That I'll never forget." Colonel Edward F. Seiler from Louisville, Kentucky, responsible for the military administration of the 12th Division which liberated Kaufering IV, ordered about 250 citizens, especially officials of the surrounding towns, to be forced at gunpoint to bury the victims. Among those who were brought to the camp was also Johann Eichelsdörfer, who in his position as the camp commandant was responsible for the aforementioned atrocities. In the camp, he was photographed in the middle of the corpses which had been laid out in the camp prior to burial. Eichelsdörfer's photo was taken at the instigation of the aforementioned Colonel Edward F. Seiler, who ordered him to stand among the dead, and the onlookers of this scene were allowed to insult Eichelsdörfer. Louis P. Lochner, a foreign correspondent for the Associated Press, and later awarded the Pulitzer Prize for his report on Germany, was in the camp that day and sought a conversation with Eichelsdörfer. The latter explained that he had no idea what was going on inside the camp, as he had never entered it. However, considering that Eichelsdörfer was the camp's commandant, one could hardly believe him. In addition, the numerous deaths, often dozens a day, could hardly have escaped his attention. Eichelsdörfer finally faced justice when he was tried at the Dachau trial, at which 9 of the 40 defendants were charged with the crimes committed at Kaufering. Eichelsdörfer was defended by Captain Darwin Niles, who argued that his client had been put in charge of the camp by the Wehrmacht after falling ill, without having had any influence on this. As a sick old man, he did not have the strength to run the camp properly. Surviving prisoners, however, testified that Eichelsdörfer had also mistreated prisoners himself, even beating them to the point of unconsciousness. These testimonies against him were also the evidence that he lied when he said that he had never entered the camp. The trial lasted from the 15th of November to the 13th of December 1945, with 70 witnesses called for the prosecution and 50 witnesses called for the defense. All 40 defendants were found guilty, with 36, including Eichelsdörfer, being sentenced to death by hanging. His sentence was carried out by American Army Sergeant John C. Woods, who had no documented pre-war experience as a hangman. He became infamous for being deliberately bad at his job, as he made the Nazi war criminals that he executed suffer a long, agonizing death. The Nazis executed by Sergeant Woods fell from the gallows with a drop insufficient to snap their necks, resulting in their death by strangulation that in some cases lasted tens of minutes. When Eichelsdörfer was executed by hanging in Landsberg War Crimes Prison at 2:14 p.m. on the 29th of May, 1946, he was 56 years old. There were no tears shed for Johann Eichelsdörfer. Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.